My name is Bjorn Berg. I'm a civil engineer for Houston Engineering, and I work in flood control as a civil engineer project manager. What I love about my job is the fact that if clients come to us with some of their biggest problems and we get to put them down on paper and look through ways that we can try to solve their problems and make their lives better and make their residents of the communities and the cities safer and more resilient. Houston Engineering was always top on my list when I graduated college as a leader in the water resources community in our region, knowing that working through flood controls through Fargo, really wanting to get in to give back to the community. As in college, the city of Fargo did flood and we did help sandbag. It was nice to have the tie of seeing what a flood can do to a community after Grand Forks and the Fargo fighting a flood, and then being on part of the other side of coming up with ways to solve problems and save the community before anything bad can happen. Right now, I've worked on projects through downtown Fargo in the past for the downtown infrastructure there with flood walls, levees, pump stations to protect the city of Fargo. And now I'm part of the Mouse River Enhanced Flood Protection Project up in Minot to help protect both rural and the urban communities from flooding based from the Souris River flood of 2011. So the cool thing about civil engineering is that everything that you can see is likely designed by a civil engineer. So you have flood walls that are built to protect from flooding. You have buildings that have foundations that you can't see, but the buildings themselves can be designed by a structural engineer. There are roads and bridges that we drive on every single day are all designed by civil engineers. So every part of our everyday life is touched by a civil engineer. Typical day for myself, it's normally come to work around 8 o'clock and try to dig through the problems that you picked up from the day before. A lot of problems on the flood control side aren't just a day, a week, a year. Sometimes they're decades in the making of something that happened 30, 40, all the way back to 100 years ago that you're designing to that flood of record in order to protect the community that you're serving. So problem solving doesn't necessarily happen in a vacuum. We have large teams that we're trying to pull in everything from all facets of engineering, mechanical, electricals, other disciplines, in order to come up with a cost-effective and solution for our clients. So as a kid, I used to take things apart and look at how they worked, and then I would put them back together and understand kind of the guts of what that was that made it tick. So going into school, I knew I wanted to do something STEM related along the engineering side, and I dealt with some construction in college and noticed the RPRs on site kind of directing traffic and ensuring that everything was getting built per the technical specs of the contract. An RPR is a resident project representative, and they inspect the job or observe the job to ensure that the contract goes per the technical specs and the job is built so the client or the city gets exactly what they paid for. Seeing that in college, I realized that was something I was really interested in, so it led me down the path of civil engineering to help design problems for these communities. I'd say it's attention to detail and trying to take every single facet from what the client or what the owner is looking for and making sure that we get a good record of really what we're trying to get after, and then being cognizant of what our design and kind of what our path forward is to make sure that we're checking not only all the boxes for them, but then doing it in the most cost-effective and resourceful way that we possibly can to provide value for their constituents. I'd say as a kid, my parents instilled a higher education was great. Really pushed towards the science and math, as that was something I excelled in pretty greatly. So when it came to college, the drive to do more and kind of keeping myself grounded was very evident from going home and getting that from my parents growing up. Going to college and learning the maths and the sciences of kind of how things work was evident of statics, of when we build a bridge, we don't want it to fall down. So incorporating all the design elements into what can cause something to fail, wind, snow loads, ice, rain, earthquakes, all that comes into play. So understanding how those forces act upon one another in order to keep something static or not moving is really big in the engineering field. So knowing how the math works and the science works behind it plays evident to why bridges don't fall down, I guess. Technology is ever changing, and ever since coming through college, it's been survey practices have changed from rod and level to GPS becoming the standard, and that's all people use now is GPS. The same is happening through the hydraulic modeling courses of using basic models without a hydrograph, to now new models having hydrographs ran through them, to newer, even more technologies enhancing that there's 2D models available to help identify velocity changes throughout a structure and better understand what bridges, roadways, and culverts can do on a waterway system. So as a PE, we're required to stay on top of our education and have to have at least 20 hours of PDH or professional development hours on a yearly basis or biannual basis. Part of that can be looking at new technologies to make our lives easier, and it can also incorporate the fact that we have lots of new hires that come in that are more cutting edge by learning something at school than maybe that wasn't available 5 years ago. So the career arc for water resource engineers is coming out of school and understanding how hydraulic models work, understanding hydrology of how flow rates are captured based on basin studies and other water resource calculations, going into the hydraulic model of cutting cross sections through rural reaches, through urban areas. Everything is different. So it might take a few years to get a full grasp of how a hydraulic model works. But after you get through your breadth of understanding how the model works, you work more into a project engineer or project manager aspect and start managing more staff that are running these models on a day in, day out basis. So really a 10-year career arc coming out of school. You're really hoping to be at the project manager, project engineer level where you're managing a few staff and really coordinating with the client and regulatory agencies on how models are developed and what you could get that would be a permittable project for the clients and for small communities. In today's environment with remote work and the fact that science in one part of the country is the exact same as science in another part of the country, the tools you learn in school or in one place really are evident in others. So the same forces that keep a bridge from falling down will work in any place in the world as long as the correct forces are applied to it during design. So there's multiple avenues that you can go into from civil engineering, as it does encompass many different disciplines, from structural to environmental to water resources, transportation. There's a big umbrella that civil engineer kind of hides underneath or holds the disciplines underneath it to keep your career aspirations open after college. So why I chose and continue to work in the Fargo-Moorhead region with Houston Engineering is the fact that my family is close by, and we've had flooding impact many of my family members throughout my life as well as others. Having family in Grand Forks and in Fargo during the floods, seeing what the devastation it can bring to not only the families but to the communities themselves. That's what I want to give back to these communities and residents, to make sure that we give them their lives and their homes and that they can come back and know that their communities are resilient. I'd say any advice I can give to somebody is to always think about yourself as growing as a person, not only technically, but also personally. Nobody wants to hire somebody or work with somebody that is really hard to talk to. So every conversation you have with somebody, think of it as a learning moment of how you can continue to grow yourself as a person.